Listen, I'm ready. I'm right. Okay. Continue. Let's do this. Right. Good evening and a happy new year to all. I'm Adam Shelton, mental health warrior, and tonight, my first broadcast of 2021, we're going to talk about suicide in 2021. I'm joined by the brilliant Brian Page. He is the Aquarius mental health uh, advocate, I can say, or therapist, or what.
Yeah,
And tonight we're going to be, yeah, we can say that, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we can. What we're going to be doing is during this difficult, traumatic time, we're going to get people talking about suicide because with me and my experience of suicide, I know how it feels. I know what that place looks like. I bet Brian does from his experience, and we're going to give that message of hope to people that silence isn't always the answer, and there is always someone either over the phone, a text message, or even face to face. But anyway, here's Brian. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you, Adam. Thank you for this opportunity. It's the first kind of podcast I've done, even though I sit here all day on a camera on Zoom talking to students and teachers. Um, Suicide,
Yeah, absolutely.
difficult subject, very complex. A lot of campaigns to stop and prevent and to make people aware of suicide. Some facts and figures would be that in the UK, three times as many men actually end their life by suicide than women. In Republic of Ireland, it's four times as many men. Um, Men are more likely to succeed at suicide because they actually choose more violent methods. That the figures were in the 2017 figures are quite easy to work with because it's actually 16 suicides a day, so it's a one every 90 minutes. So you're really looking at 12 men, four women. So like a guy ends his life by suicide every 2 hours, and a young lady or woman will end their life by suicide every 6 hours.
Yeah.
I do know the figures increased by about 11% in 2018. So now it's like one suicide like every 80 minutes in 2018. So probably with the same ratio, you're looking at about 13 and a half men to like four and a half women. So one every 80 minutes.
No,
And
yeah, absolutely. It's very traumatic, and what's bugging me about it is obviously I'm just going off my experience. The NHS, they are not doing as much as they're supposed to for mental health. Mental health suicide, shall I say? Well, obviously I was fobbed off, but that doesn't mean someone else is going to be fobbed off.
Well, we know at the moment in 2020 and 2021 that the NHS are actually stretched to their limits by COVID, this pandemic. I do know that last year or 2019, the suicide figures in Northern Ireland actually dropped because they used to have the highest rate per 100,000 in the UK. And on talking to people, I'm kind of learning that doctors' surgeries in Northern Ireland now actually have a mental health nurse. So it might be part of a campaign going there. And in Northern Ireland, figures dropped by about a third in 2019.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's brilliant. But obviously, with like England, and Wales, and Scotland as well. Like I've heard, and I don't know how true it is, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But I've actually heard since March 2020, suicide has gone up by 200%.
I don't know. I can't comment on that because normally it takes a whole year to get suicide figures together. So in December 2020, that only just kind of put the 2019 figures together.
Yeah.
And that was only about a 4% increase on the previous year because the rate in Northern Ireland had dropped, I would say dramatically. 30% drop is quite dramatic.
Exactly. Now, obviously, as you said, men choose the more violent outcome when it comes to suicide. Obviously, in my opinion, I believe the majority of it is actually to do with traumatic experiences they've experienced. For example, domestic violence with an ex-partner, or PTSD due to childhood trauma. But obviously, like I experienced that, and it just goes on and on. But they're afraid to speak out because obviously they get the things like man up, stop being self-pity, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and that quite winds people up and makes
Yes,
life worse.
it does. What it does, it prevents a barrier, and there becomes this self stigma, so people don't actually look for help. It is because there's a general lack of knowledge about mental health by like the general public and society, that when they speak about it and when suicide's covered in the press, it's sometimes glamorized if they don't use the right kind of terminology. And often people do not want to talk about mental health, so it just escalates or spirals downwards, really, to the fact that they cannot cope, and men cannot cope as well as women can. Men are bad at emotional management.
Yeah.
So when you look at midlife and the male suicide rate is the highest in like the mid to late 40s, it's because if there's any kind of divorce or breakup, then it's normally the guy kind of loses the wife, he might lose the house, he might lose the children. And men actually need women in their life for emotional support.
Exactly. And obviously, it is known that, and obviously, I'm not going to come by as sexist here, but women do actually carry the family because men are, in my opinion, they should be classed as just as vulnerable as females, also. But it seems, obviously, for example, in today's society, men are actually classed as second class citizens, and they are deemed as a threat towards.
Men seem to have the job of providing for the family, but if the
Yeah,
women possibly support and look after the family, they look after themselves, they tend to look after the children,
yeah,
and they look after their husband. Um, in most households, some households might be different. I mean, that's not 100%. You know, there are some cases where the guy will stay at home and look after the children if the wife is a high flying earner. So, you know, it's not a 100% kind of case that all men are the breadwinners, all women are look after the family. It's a healthy mix, but the majority of households are looked after by the woman of the house.
abs- yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the next one is, how do we actually get men and women as well to push that barrier down and get them talking?
That's so difficult. I mean, that there has to be campaigns. The media has to reach out. People have to make an awareness. It's okay not to be okay. You know, there are good pioneers out there that are anti-suicide. You know, a guy called Johnny Benjamin. There's a guy in America called Kevin Hines. They're both people that have attempted suicide, they've survived or not gone through with it, and now they're kind of campaigning and helping people. I mean, this year I think there's a project where some people are raising like teen awareness to suicide. You know, it is something that needs addressing. At the moment, the national health are kind of inundated with what's going on with the COVID situation. Perhaps there needs to be some TV advertising, but who will fund it? Or some radio advertising. It actually needs to be kind of prevalent in the media that something needs to be done about mental health and suicide.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about teen teen campaigning, and I'm actually glad you mentioned that because obviously, yes, between the ages of 25 and 50, I think it is, in males, that is the biggest percentage for male suicide.
Yeah,
Also, the younger generation, I think it's like between 13 and 15-year-olds, they are the biggest percentage for teenage suicides as well because of cyberbullying, and which obviously leads to suicide. And and this is what really bugs me, and this is what I'm actually pushing for as well, is getting mental health spoken more in schools and colleges.
but that's the only place I'm involved at the moment. It's not so much industry. Some of my clients, and the majority of them, are schools, a healthy mix of schools across the country. Some are state schools, some are private schools, but that's where it needs to be, I believe. It's for early intervention. If you can kind of capture and stop mental health problems in teenage years escalating through into adulthood, through adolescence into adulthood, then that's one way that it can be dealt with. It's obviously going to take a generation or so to do it. It's not an overnight fix.
No, no, it's not. No, it's not. And obviously, the only thing we can do is just keep spreading this awareness and get people, even if it's on podcasts, obviously due to COVID, get people on podcasts, and just get them talking because we all have a story to be told, and it's time we actually got that mentioned. Don't listen to the news because the news are just a pack of crap, to be honest. When they say social distance, don't listen to that. I've never listened to it, and the reason why I don't listen to it because I've never felt so social connected with others because I speak to people all across the world, from New Zealand, Canada, Australia, you name it, and things like Zoom, video calls, FaceTime, whatever, text message. There's always someone there just to talk to you, even just to listen.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one thing that I think is wrong at the moment is what we have to go through when we're 2 meters apart from someone. That should just be classed as physical distance. Do not socially distance yourself. Stay in contact with people. That's the message here. Text people, ring people, talk to people on Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp, whatever. Still socially communicate with people. Do not socially distance yourself. Just do the physical distance, 2 meters. It's nothing to do with being social. That's actually a physical distance. People have to remain in contact socially. So, and that's just my take on it, to be honest.
We've all got our takes, but we'll leave that for a different conversation, won't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you've got your opinion, I've got my opinion, but that's not what we're here for. But either way, COVID is definitely like it is. It is said, and I've actually seen this on LinkedIn as well, that COVID has been the biggest threat to mental health since World War II.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
No, but I fully understand that because at the moment, unless you're like in your 80s or 90s, you'd have had no recollection of World War II. So anyone 75 years and older now will not have experienced anything. So like most of our population, this is the biggest thing that they've experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And it is a trauma. It is a trauma. There are people now, just not suicide, but there's people now that will be experiencing stress, anxiety, depression, that have never suffered from it before because of what's going on at the moment. They might see their children self-harming. They might see their children with eating disorders. You know, they might even feel suicidal themselves. So there's going to be a lot more people now that are actually realizing what mental health is. So that might actually start breaking the stigma down, because people that did not understand mental health before will now actually understand what it's like to have their mental well-being affected. And the mental well-being is how people feel psychologically, emotionally and socially. And that's going to vary quite a lot to what it was 1 year ago and definitely 2 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And what is one last piece of advice you'll give him on that? Actually, like I said, just recognize that they have got depression, anxiety, PTSD due to
Well,
all of this.
I,
And they don't know what to do.
I would say that there's two bits of advice. First of all, is if you have anything that you feel is wrong with you and you think your mental well-being is being compromised, then talk about it. And if someone's talking to you, then the second thing would be listen to that person.
Yeah.
Spend time, show empathy, try and support the person, comfort them, keep them safe, try and signpost them forward. You know, that is the biggest thing. One thing, never be afraid to ask someone if they've got suicidal thoughts or intentions of suicide, because that won't make the person suddenly think, oh, that's a good idea, I hadn't thought of that. It's not going to do that at all. If you ask someone if they're feeling suicidal, it shows that you recognize that this person is vulnerable, needs some help, and you might be in a position to be able to help them. Once someone starts talking about their feelings, then that's a way forward. That's a way of getting them help. It's the people that don't talk, the people that just disappear and end their own life because they just won't talk or can't talk or don't know who to talk to.
Exactly. And I'm going to give one prime example as well. The celebrity Chester Bennington. I don't know if you know him, but he was the lead singer to Linkin Park. Obviously, he ended his life due to obviously childhood trauma, and obviously he was actually trying to get that message out that he was suffering on a radio station as well, and nobody recognised, nobody saw those signs.
No, I've heard of him. I've heard of the group. I'm not au fait with that case, though. I mean, what things that are more prevalent are people like probably Robin Williams. You know, that is possibly one of the biggest talked about suicides since Marilyn Monroe, supposedly.
Yeah, yeah,
Some
absolutely.
50 years apart. You know.
Well, before my time.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's been a privilege having you on, Brian, and don't be a stranger, and I cannot wait, yeah, to bring you back on.
Yeah. Anytime. I'm quite happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we will shut off this broadcast. It will be uploaded onto YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, a lot. And yeah, we will see you all again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Adam. Thank you.